In this week's episode of Studio Inter, we'll be reviewing the quarterfinal against Bayer Leverkusen in the Europa League. We'll be previewing the semifinal of the Europa League. We'll be discussing with Sheridan Bird from Juve TV this week's Modji, Murati and Frog, and much, much more. Everything here on Studio Inter, on SempreInter.com.
Per De Vrij, c'è l'autore per Messina, l'ha presa! L'ha ripresa Messina! L'ha ripresa Messina! Il toro! Il toro! Il toro! Il tiro! Samir! Bandanovic! La recupera Brozovic, andiamo in contropiede, la porta è vuota, tira, attenzione, e gol!
Benvenuti, bentornati to another edition of Studio Inter. We will keep doing these podcasts as promised, as long as Inter's hopes in the Europa League are alive, and they seem to live for another week, or at least they will live for another week. Now, how long they will live next week remains to be seen, as there's a semi-final that needs to be played. But before we get to that, let me introduce our panelists. Our good friend, the preview writer at SempreInter.com, Mr. Mohamed Nasser. How are you, Mo?
I'm very happy, and I hope I'm making everyone believe in the dream. European silverware.
No, I mean, you've been spot on about it. You were the first one who said second place and Europa League title, and after everything that happened, I've jumped on that train, especially after what happened with Conte and the Atalanta game. But let's we'll get into all of that. And we're also joined by a good friend from London, a boiling hot London apparently, Mr. William Beckman.
Hello, Nima. Yes, we're in the 30s. We're not used to it. We're all struggling, but we're getting on with it. I'm happy because I've got the Europa League theme stuck in my head. I've
got it as well, but I've got Marco Violi singing it in my head.
Okay, I can't quite match that. But the important thing is that the Europa League is prolonging not only inter-season, but our season. So
yes,
thank you for that.
Yes, thank you very much for that, Inter. And we're also joined by our good friend, Reverend Mike, the deputy editor of The Athletic in Dallas, Texas. Welcome back, Mike.
Thanks for having me, boys. I will see the hot temperatures in London that Will is dealing with, and I will raise you every day of my life in Texas.
Yeah, but it's not fair because you live in Texas and you're prepared for it.
This is true.
We're not prepared for this in Sweden or in the UK. Right, and we're also joined by a special guest. He used to commentate for the World Feed on the Serie A World Feed, and now he's on Juve TV. Mr. Sheridan Bird, welcome back.
Hello, it's a pleasure to be here. Hello, people of Inter.
Hello, Mr. Commentator from the good people of Fiat. I would like to start right there. This, Juve are quite, have been in the headlines, not just because they won the Scudetto, but the manner in which they lost the Champions League round of 16 against, or was it quarterfinal even, against, no, it was the round of 16, against Lyon, and then Lyon, and then Maurizio Sarri getting sacked, and then of all people, Andrea Pirlo. Not that I doubt his footballing knowledge, but the fact that he's never even coached a day of his life after having got his coaching badges. I'm really keen to hear how the talk is. Well, from someone who works for you, right? What's your perspective on all this?
Well, look, Nima. First of all, I've got to say that it's what I do is fairly periphery. It's not as if I'm not in the meetings with Agnelli and Paratici, in case you're wondering.
No.
Although my Italian accent is probably better than Nedved's. But the truth is, it's an interesting one. The Champions League, I commentated on the Champions League exit. As you alluded to, I'm the English language commentator for Juventus TV. And I was shocked because when Cristiano Ronaldo, with his left foot, scored that absolute rocket to make it 2-1, it was 59 minutes on the clock. So you don't need to be a mathematician to realise that half an hour plus additional time, Juventus had 36 minutes to score a single goal. And I thought they would. So I was quite shocked. Obviously, the board, the directors were very, very shocked. The fans, I would say, were shocked and quite disgusted. And poor old Maurizio Sarri, I'm one of his few fans, in northern Italy. Poor old Maurizio Sarri paid the ultimate price, and in stepped Andrea Pirlo, which is a fascinating appointment.
It is a fascinating appointment for many reasons, because the fact that he was appointed as coach of Juve's under-23 side just 11 days ago. This is the 11th of August when we're recording this. And he must have done a hell of a job in those 11 days, or 7 days prior to him being appointed. No, but seriously, I mean, what
Silly Nima.
Yes, silly me, silly Billy. No, but seriously, what are your expectations going into next season? I mean, what can we expect from Pirlo and Juve, do you think?
As soon as the announcement was made, I thought one thing. I thought they'd been very intelligent, and I will explain why.
Yes.
Because if he becomes their Guardiola or their Zidane, i.e. next season they win in style and they go far in the Champions League and they even win it, everyone will say what an inspired appointment, fantastic, they've unearthed a gem. If it goes a bit wrong, they'll probably move him out quietly this time next year, and then I think they will hire a very famous name. I think the dream is still Pep Guardiola, but I think maybe also Maurizio Pochettino would go down well with his Piemonte heritage. So I think add to that the fact that his salary, compared to normal people, obviously not compared to you, Nima, but his salary is relatively low. I think it's a masterstroke, and I'm honestly saying that from the football fan, not anything to do with the fact that I do commentaries for them. I just think it's a really clever plan because he won't cost them loads. They're paying Maurizio Sarri off something like £21 million to get rid of him. And if it goes wrong, if it doesn't work out, if he becomes their Clarence Seedorf or their Pippo Inzaghi at Milan, they'll just move him out in the summer and get someone massive in. If it goes well, it's an unexpected bonus and he'll get a huge raise this time next year. Yes,
that's a good point. I mean, but the only thing is that this is Juve usually. I mean, I agree with you in the sense that Juve are, they always, they're very unceremonious about rejuvenation and rebuilding their squad. But I can't really remember them ever appointing a coach. I mean, Pirlo, of course, as you said. If he turns out to be their Zidane or Pep Guardiola, it's a masterstroke. But it is an exciting appointment because it's Pirlo. I mean, no one would doubt his footballing skills or understanding of the game. I'll hand you over to Will. Did you have a question for Sheridan?
I did, yes. Hi, Sheridan. I'm sure you saw Inter's fantastic win in the Europa League quarterfinals against Bayer Leverkusen on Monday evening. But and a performance that felt like a bit of a statement and really put them in contention to win this tournament. So with the possibility of Inter winning the Europa League in mind, I just wanted to ask you about a debate that we were having on this show a couple of weeks ago about Antonio Conte. Obviously, we don't quite know at this stage whether he's going to stay or not. We're going to have to wait for this infamous face-to-face meeting whenever it can happen after the end of the season. But I was interested a couple of weeks ago when Mo on this pod said that he thought that if Inter won the Europa League, that would increase the chances that he left. And I think, Nima, correct if I'm wrong, you also said that you agreed with that as well. So, Sheridan, I just wanted to know, do you think that Inter's winning of the Europa League could change the future of Antonio Conte's career, or whether it's going to be simply about whether they can thrash out their differences when they sit down after the season ends?
Well, that's a hell of a question. I think it's very Interista to assume you've already won it, so well done on that. I think I'll tell you one thing that's not massively relevant to your question, but what I love about the Europa League and not the Champions League is the Europa League is linear. It's like a computer game because each level you get a harder team. In the Champions League, you can face someone really tough in the round of 16. Then you can face a completely, flimsy team in the quarterfinals, the semi-finals. Well, that's not the case in the Europa League. So I think Inter, for me, they did struggle a bit against Leverkusen, and their semi-final will be a lot harder than that. And by definition, the final will be even harder. So I would say you're better off playing Shakhtar Donetsk than Basel, obviously. If they were to win it, it wouldn't surprise me in the sense that many of the younger listeners to this podcast might not know, but in the 90s, it was Inter's competition. If they weren't winning the old version, the UEFA Cup, they were losing on penalties in the final. So Inter have got history. They love this trophy. I would say Inter respect this trophy. So I think they've got a good chance. As for whether Conte would sort of pop the trophy on the table after the match at the press conference and say, I've done my job, and sort of flounce out, that would be hilarious to see. But no, I think he wants to win the league with Inter. I think he wants to bring the Scudetto trophy, as it were, back to this city, back to Milan. So I think he'll stay, but I think that the board are probably already thinking this time next year it might be a proper goodbye, because he did, as Nima and I have discussed several times, he did make a bit of an exhibition of himself towards the end of the domestic season and act like a bit of a baby. But that's what you get with Antonio Conte. You get a sort of a defined, muscular, strangely haired crybaby.
Mo, did you have a question for Sheridan?
First, I'd just like to set the record straight. I never said after like the overall likelihood would be high. Should Inter win? I think the likelihood would increase, but I think overall, on the balance of things, we're probably seeing Conte next season on the bench. But that's just to get that out of the way. My question to you, Sheridan, is regarding Juve over Sarri. We've been hearing talk about maybe Pirlo coveting Tonali and wanting an image of himself in his own midfield. Do you reckon that this is something that's realistic? Are they going to really pull a U-turn? And we're going to see them fight it out with Inter and possibly Milan for Tonali over the summer?
The truth is, I wouldn't be surprised, because young Italian players tend to go to Juventus. It doesn't always work out. I mean, look at Bernardeschi, look at the rumoured move for Chiesa. Tonali's gone on record saying that he sees himself as more of a Gattuso than a Pirlo. But the other thing that people haven't really mentioned about Pirlo being hired by Juventus is that they will be able to attract some really good players. Because imagine you're a young Italian player like Zaniolo or like Tonali, and Pirlo phones you up and says, do you want to come and play for me for the most successful Italian side ever? It's a real draw. So I would say it's not as sure now that Tonali will go to Inter. I just think it's such a massive draw, just like Zidane going to Real Madrid was. So many people grew up watching, loving Zidane, and either stayed with Real Madrid, like Karim Benzema, or they joined Real Madrid. So I would say Tonali, I think this Pirlo situation has changed the landscape in terms of exciting Italian talent. Because as I say, if you're on the beach on holiday and Andrea Pirlo phones you up, you're going to probably be very excited.
Yeah, that remains to be seen. Mike, did you have a question for Sheridan?
Yeah, that I think kind of leads into what I was going to ask you, which is a little bit broader just on transfers. Whether it's Sandro Tonali, whether it's something else, do you see Andrea Pirlo sort of changing Juventus's directive in the market this summer? And if so, what's left to do? Obviously, there's the big Artur Pjanic swap. Kulusevski's coming in, so stands to reason that maybe the two biggest purchases are already done. But what do you expect Juventus to be doing in the market? And for a team that there has been some questions about how much cash flow they have, and now you're paying off Maurizio Sarri. How do they plan on funding this? Are you expecting something bigger and a big outgoing amount of sales? Are you expecting a few tweaks now that the two big signings are done? What do you anticipate before next season starts?
Well, I would certainly say that they need to get some creativity in midfield, and I think they'll need to buy a centre forward or get a centre forward who's out of contract, maybe from the south of Italy in light blue. I just think that Higuain could be near the exit. Matuidi's already sort of said that he's on the way out. Federico Bernardeschi, his days might be numbered. So I think Pirlo, the defence, one thing about this Juventus is they don't have to touch central defence. De Ligt and Demiral are fantastic for the future. Chiellini's got another season in him. Bonucci as well, but they do need some creativity, and they need a new number 9, a new centre forward. One of the things about Inter, because I know this is an Inter podcast, Inter yesterday showed the value of having a real number 9. It's great fun seeing falso nueves or seeing number 9s who do, are good team players and they've got a good light touch and they bring others in but never score. That's fine. But there is maybe something to be said. Maybe it will come back into fashion to have a number 9 who does all that and also scores loads of goals. And I have to say, I'm really pleased for Romelu Lukaku, because he is a number 9 who bullies the man who's marking him, and he scores goals, and he scores loads of goals and important goals. And I think Juventus would like some of that.
Yes, I couldn't agree. I mean, I wanted to ask you about this Cristiano Ronaldo thing, because one of the things that we've heard about Khedira, Matuidi, Gonzalo Higuain, etc., etc. A lot of that they want to offload a lot of these players and rebuild young, and this is classic Juve. It's not the first time in history they would have sold a big name player like Zidane to not win the Scudetto next year, but then win the next 3 the year after that. Do you and selling Ronaldo would save them an enormous amount of money, plus as well as any transfer fee they get for him. Do you think he'll stay next season at Juve?
Well, that is the big question. I mean, it's really hard to say, to be quite honest. He doesn't really say much about his situation, and nor would he, by the way. It reminds me of the old phrase. It reminds me of the old anecdote about the guy who gets fired. And he says to his boss, but you didn't say to me you were going to fire me before Christmas. And his boss says to you, well, I'm hardly going to come up to you and say, I'm thinking of firing you, but we'll wait till Christmas. So, Ronaldo is hardly going to come out and say, I'm thinking of leaving. He's a massive draw. He's done wonders for the Juventus brand, but his salary is huge. And it might mean that others have to move out to try and balance the books. But I think he was, Juve's best player last season. So I think he'll do. I think he'll finish the next season. I think he'll do one more season for Juventus, and then I think 3 years will have been a good partnership for everybody involved.
A good point. I'd like to thank you for coming on, Sheridan. I'd also wanted to. This is the point usually where I ask our guests to plug something and say if people want to follow them on Twitter. But you removed yourself from Twitter, so I don't. So I'll just leave the floor and say, what can people expect from you? Are you going to do Juve TV next season? What are you going to do? What happens next in the world of Sheridan?
Well, holiday. No, jokes aside, yeah, I did get rid of Twitter because I found it neither informative or entertaining, and that should be the idea of life. If you're not being entertained, you should be being informed. If you can be both at the same time, shawadi wadi, great stuff. Yeah, I mean, like I say, it's a bit weird asking people to pay money for Juventus TV on an Inter podcast, but that's where it's a bit masochistic. Although I know in lots of countries across the world, people do have more than one team in La Liga, Serie A, the Premier League. But my commentaries will still be in English on Juventus television, which has lots of great content, but not if you're an Inter fan. And I will still, pop up doing writing here and there. But for now, the main thing is just to, the matches, the commentaries are finished until sort of mid to late September when the season starts again. So in theory, it's holiday time, and I want to be as stylish and as bohemian during my holidays as you are, Nima, in a normal life.
Thank you very much, Sheridan. As always, a pleasure. Thanks for coming on.
Cheers. Bye-bye, everybody. Have a nice summer, everyone.
Thanks, Sheridan. You too, and well done. I know how much hard work you guys have done to commentate in this intense manner these past few weeks. Must have been a lot of work. So well done. Enjoy your holiday.
Cheers. Bye, everybody.
Ciao. Right. Let's talk about the game against Bayer Leverkusen, because that was one of the most one of the craziest Inter performances ever. It was an orgy of missed chances. I was tweeting with you, Mo, yesterday that we were, this reminded me of Schalke in the UEFA Cup Final '97, a game that Inter really should have won and dominated, but could not score to save their lives. And I really, really thought it was going to end in tears because the amount of chances they missed. I'm keen to hear what you think, Mo. I mean, now that you've got 24 hours distance to it, what do you make of that? I mean, do you still think Inter can go all the way and win the Europa League?
Yeah, no, I think we absolutely can. I don't want to jinx it, but I think yesterday's game was absolutely fantastic. I think it's one of those things where we're on the edge of our seat and we're super tense because we've got so much invested into the game. But I reckon if we were to watch the game, with some distance and distance between us and the final whistle, you'd see that it was actually not that close. I mean, Handanovic really wasn't threatened that much. I think against Getafe, it was actually Getafe had much more serious chances than Leverkusen did, albeit they had that goal and then that cross that flashed in front of Havertz and unbelievably De Vrij managed to retract his extended leg in the last second. Otherwise, he'd probably score an own goal. It was masterful from the Dutchman. But I think it was very frustrating because we'd seen that tape so many times before. We've seen that movie before in the Serie A. Chances created, and then towards the end we just concede. But I think, and I tweeted this yesterday, I think the way they had managed the last 10 minutes of the first half was very telling of how mature the team has become in the last few weeks for some reason. I don't know if this is a conscious maturity or it just so happens to be the case, but the way the last 10 or 15 minutes of the first half were managed, when the legs were gone, when they were panting, were gasping for breath, and when it was clear that their fitness was far below Leverkusen's, was very mature. And I think they managed the second half in a very similar way after the 30th minute or so, especially in light of Sanchez's thigh injury, his hamstring injury, and coming back on all wrapped up. So just this is a very long-winded way of saying I think it wasn't as close as we thought it was while watching it, and I still believe that, having seen what we've seen from other teams, I still think that probably Sevilla are the most dangerous, but even then I think Conte's wile is enough. Wile and guile is enough to outsmart Lopetegui. So this is the short answer.
Will, do you agree with that? Do you think that Inter were that it looked worse to us just because we're Inter fans and used to them doing this to us and torturing us, or do you think that there's actually it was pretty close and Inter, maybe Inter needed this to kind of to win despite not. Maybe Inter needed to not do an Inter and win for once, as opposed to bottling it.
Well, you'd think that Mo and I had been sort of setting up our comments before the game, because funnily enough, today I did watch the game again with the knowledge of the full-time result to find out exactly that. Because a lot of the talk in the post-game last night was about how if it had been 5-1, then it would have been a fair score, and that it was much more nervy than it should have done. And I couldn't really test that because it was very tense. This was a big deal. But I have the gift of time at the moment, as I suppose a lot of us do at the moment. And so I watched the game again, and effectively, yes, Bayer Leverkusen hardly created a thing in the second half. They had two moments that I noted. One was the shot that Handanovic saved from Demir Bay, but that was very central and not a ridiculous save, one you'd expect him to make. And then the other one was a cross that came in where Kai Havertz missed it by an inch, and then Volland didn't get it at the far post. But other than that, there was a lot of possession in Inter's half, a lot of crossing. But actually, the game management, I thought personally, was a lot better than against Getafe, where Inter were very deep with 15, 20 minutes to go, gave away a penalty, were led off on a couple of occasions, I thought, by, frankly, Getafe not being very good and being extremely limited in terms of the quality of their attacking players. Whereas I felt a lot more confident coming out of this game. It should have been a lot easier. But the fact that it wasn't and that you won anyway is in itself a good sign. A weaker team, maybe mentally, would have had trouble having gone 2-0 up, then had a great chance to make it 3-0. Immediately, you concede a goal to make it 2-1. Then you get a penalty immediately afterwards, which is then taken off via VAR. And so after a 5-minute spell in which you could have been 3-0 or 3-1 up, you're still 2-1 up. And Bayer Leverkusen are coming into the game. So that was a real test. And I think we passed it very well. I thought that funnily enough, more than the final 10 minutes of the first half, I was impressed with the final 10 minutes of the second half, because there wasn't much going on really. It was mainly us that was going forward. But Conte made some good changes in the second half. He made them a little bit earlier than he does normally, bringing on Eriksen with half an hour left, bringing on Sanchez with 25 minutes left, and I think they had the desired effect. So yeah, it was nervy, of course, because when it's a 1-goal lead, you never know what's going to happen, especially with the amount of points that have been dropped from winning positions this year. But if that was a match played by a team that hadn't dropped that many points this season, I think we wouldn't necessarily have been as fatalistic heading into the last half an hour, because frankly, Inter were on another level to Leverkusen. I thought they created so much more. I wasn't necessarily expecting that going in. I think I said it was a toss of a coin on our last pod. So I was very pleasantly surprised with how much better the performance was. Felt like a bit of a statement, much more than the game against Getafe is, at least as far as I'm concerned. So yeah, I'm not certain that we're going to win the Europa League. I didn't mean to say that earlier when I was asking Sheridan the question. So I'm not assuming that we're going to win it by any means. I'm probably still the most pessimistic of all of us if we're going to do a league table of that. But I felt definitely more confident after this match, because that looked like a team that had a very clear objective in its mind. It was not going to be a team that's happy just to reach the semi-final. You know, they put everything out there on the pitch, and they are going to be a difficult match for anyone left in the competition. So, yeah, for once, I was very encouraged. And
I mean, the thing is, I agree with a lot of things. I mean, the reasoning behind what you and most say. I thought Conte once again showed that he had prepared perfectly for this game. I mean, the team was perfect in terms of mentally prepared. They were prepared for physically, tactically, in every way. They were prepared, and they executed that really well. But I mean, I've also rewatched that game, and although they didn't really have any shots on goal, they did. I mean, still watching this again, I was on the edge of my seat, and I felt that it was one of those. It was not luck, because Inter were balanced and did well, but it wasn't. I didn't feel that, like what you guys say, that you know that this was more us being Inter fans than Inter actually not being as unstable as I thought they were. I don't know. I'm still not entirely convinced. But Mike, what do you think? What do you make of it?
I'm actually going to side with Will and Mo on this. I felt fairly calm in the second half, and Will, just like Mo set up Will a little bit, I think Will's setting me up a bit for one of the things that I was most impressed by was not only did I feel like they were in control, but they were in control after making substitutions that were very proactive. We don't see Conte doing this as much recently, right? I mean, what was going into this match? He used the same lineup he's been using recently, which is a very conservative lineup, putting D'Ambrosio on that, at that right wing back spot. Essentially, once he's in there, saying we're only going to attack through really the left channel in a lot of ways, and sometimes the midfield. But again, without Eriksen on the pitch, you don't guarantee a lot of great chances up the middle. So I was sitting here thinking, okay, well, I guess it's going to be the same pragmatic approach. But in the second half, Conte got more aggressive. He took out D'Ambrosio and put in Victor Moses, first to go in and, attack more on that right channel. Eriksen comes in at the same time. And when Eriksen came in, I think it's important to note, when I saw him getting up on the sideline, I was thinking, okay, well, I was shocked, first of all, he went in so early. That has been a departure from the norm. But I figured, given everything we've all talked about how he does not trust Marcelo Brozovic and Christian Eriksen at the same time, I figured, okay, Brozovic is going out. Instead, we got 40 minutes of the midfield that I think all of us have hoped would work, which is Brozovic and Eriksen and Nicolo Barella at the same time. And I'm not going to sit here and say it was perfect. I think there's still a lot of kinks to be worked out, but it showed that it was workable. And so not only were Inter creating chances still, and in particular, I mean, the one that stands out to me in that second half was that pass that in the 65th minute that Eriksen plays to Sanchez. I mean, that there hasn't been a guy since Schneider on this club that could have made that pass.
It was gorgeous. It was
beautiful, absolutely beautiful.
It was delicious to watch.
Oh my gosh, yeah. And I mean, it's just just a little tease of what could be coming. So the fact that Inter didn't concede an easy goal and they stayed in control, they were still creating chances. They should have been more clinical, but they created these chances. But on the strength of Conte making changes that are less defensively oriented, that builds a lot of confidence in me. And I think the big picture change beyond just that, for why I feel a little bit better in general, and I think he deserves some credit, is Diego Godin. He's been much better since the restart, and I think through a lot of this season, for better or for worse, that right side of that three-man defense it's been a question mark. I think we all have wanted Milan Skriniar to work there. It's just in some matches it has, there have been some matches that haven't. D'Ambrosio got a little bit of time there. Godin doesn't look like vintage, maybe best center back in the world, Godin, but he looks solid and he's looking comfortable, and clearly Conte trusts him. And I think him back there with De Vrij, with Bastoni, makes me feel pretty good about where that back three is at. So I think watching that match, just feeling a little bit better in the bigger picture that this back three can work for at least the rest of the way. And then just, I think the overall security and the presence of mind that, the team had and that Conte had to trust this team to put in more proactive, substitutions, to go after it a little more instead of just sitting back and hanging back. And, I think that helped too, because if he just sat there and turtled up a little bit and just said, we'll lean on the defense, but we're going to sit there and, just wait this out, I probably would have panicked a little more. But I was sitting there going, you know what, at the end of the day, I mean, it's even if Leverkusen are getting chances, if all Inter have to do is stop it, and there's a decent chance going forward that something is going to happen. Because if they created that many chances and scored in the first half, even though they didn't get that third goal, I was absolutely thinking, okay, there is a third goal to come in this half, because there's just too much firepower and there's just too much attacking momentum for something not to happen.
I mean, that's a really good point, because, well, tell you what, now, when I think about it, I think maybe what was bothering me is the fact that I think I've been carrying the luggage of the entire season with me when going into this game. And I think one of the things that really annoyed me is how Inter constantly concede on the first shot. I mean, it feels that way, and I've looked the stats up. I was going to look the stats up, but I didn't have time to. But I saw something online that this is something like 60% of all the goals we've scored, or all the goals we've conceded, is first shots on target. That bothers me. And the fact that Diego Godin again played him on side, although, I mean, you're absolutely right, Mike, he's way better than he's been before. I mean, there's no doubt about it. He even said so himself post-game that, after playing 20 years in one way with Atletico Madrid and Uruguay, I've been forced to learn something completely new here at Inter, and I'm finally starting to understand what he means, what he wants me to do, and that's all great. But I think the fact that, Inter started the game off well, as they always do. They scored in the beginning of the games, as they've always done this season, and then immediately the first shot on goal was conceded. Not because I can't blame Handanovic for that, because if your defense leaves you alone with a striker of Kai Havertz's caliber 1 meter away from the goal, he's going to score. I mean, he has no chance to react to that. And Godin obviously played Kai Havertz on side there. So I don't know. I think you're onto something. I think maybe I carry the luggage with me and not just looked at this as just this entire game. And also the insane nature of this game. It was back and forth. That first 45 minutes was just mental, and it continued like that.
The first half hour in particular.
Yeah, I mean, it was
like
back.
Rocky. It was a roller coaster. Yeah.
Yeah, it really, really was. And I think that kind of put me. That kind of it kind of made me a little bit insecure and going forward. So I don't know, but I still think
you're an Inter fan, you have to be insecure. It's part of the package.
Yeah, that's a very good point. But no, I mean, but having said that, I still think I don't know why. I think that I still think Inter are going to win, but I think the challenge lies in the semi-final. I think it doesn't matter if it's Man United or if it's Sevilla or Wolverhampton or whoever it is on the other side. It doesn't matter. I think Inter will win the final. But I think the trap game is against Shakhtar, who are leading 2-0 against Basel, much to my dismay, because Ricky van Wolfswinkel plays for Basel, and I like saying Ricky van Wolfswinkel. And they're 2-0 down. So it's going to be Shakhtar most likely. And I think that is going to be a really tricky game, because if they're anything to go by, they are masters of hurting clubs who make mistakes defensively and leave their midfield exposed. And against Bayer Leverkusen, Inter kind of did that. So, I mean, just assuming now, Mo, that we're playing Shakhtar Donetsk, do you agree with my analysis there, or what's your thought there going into that game?
Look, I think I agree with you in the sense that for sure Shakhtar are the tougher side between them and Basel. But I also kind of think that it's nice to be playing Shakhtar, the more obviously dangerous side, because we're less at risk of taking, when you come so close to the final, a lot of psychology comes into play. and you're always at risk in a semi-final of, especially if it's a quote unquote an easy semi-final of losing sight of taking your eyes off the ball and taking it as a foregone conclusion that you're in the final. So I think playing against a tougher side, clearly a difficult side that everyone is wary of, like Shakhtar, is good for the mentality. It's good for the preparation. And we always say that Conte is a man who knows how to set up a team given a week. And now we have a full week for the first time in months, a full week to prepare for the game. I'm still worried about Sevilla in the final. If we do in fact, beat Shakhtar and reach the final, I would still be weary of Sevilla. Anyone else, I think our chances would be quite strong. But yeah, that's where I stand.
Will, where are you on this?
I don't know if Shakhtar are a harder match than Sevilla or Manchester United. I don't think there's a huge difference in terms of the level of difficulty. I'd be more interested in the psychological approach to a first European semi-final in 10 years and how we'd approach mentally the eventual final. Honestly, we haven't seen Inter in a final for 9 years, so I don't feel like I even have the data to analyse that. In terms of Shakhtar themselves, assuming that they don't collapse in the second half against Basel while we're recording this podcast, they are a reasonably similar team from what I can see to Bayer Leverkusen, perhaps with a little bit less, shall we say, ridiculousness at the back. So you might not get as many chances against Shakhtar as you do against Bayer Leverkusen, who are weak at the back as it is, and then lost Sven Bender in the warm-up. So it was always going to be a difficult game for them in terms of defending. They've got a lot of Brazilian players. Shakhtar, I know. Tyson is a player that's been linked to European clubs for several years. Marlos is good. Junior Moraes has scored this evening. Marcos Antonio apparently is a very good player as well. One of the most promising players in this Europa League season so far. So it's not by no means an easy game, and there is always a chance with the side from not one of the traditional sort of 5 or 6 powerhouse leagues that you do underestimate it because they're from Ukraine, because they get less exposure, and because they're not necessarily a glamorous name. But I don't think Conte and his players will fall into that trap. It'll be a good game. It's not easy. I think we're the favourites. I think we can definitely score goals against them, and so I think it may come down to being able to take 1 or 2 more chances than we did against Bayer Leverkusen, because they were particularly, shall we say, charitable in defence at times. Having said that, let's remember that it's our inability to kill off games that's the reason we're in the Europa League in the first place. Because if we killed off games off against Dortmund and Barcelona, we'd probably have got out in the last 16 of the Champions League. So
that's not true. The reason we're out of the Champions League is because we bought players from Cagliari and Sassuolo as opposed to Real Madrid and Barcelona.
That's true. Sorry, scratch.
Sorry,
that,
I will
scratch
never ever I will never be able to let that go.
Well, can I use that as a segue, because there are a lot of I've actually got sort of 4 or 5 players that I think would be worth a comment. We've already talked about Godin, so I won't do that. But Barella, I thought was incredible in that game against Bayer Leverkusen. Lukaku himself said it in his post-match interview very generously that he thought he was the man of the match, which sort of is another example of how he's always looking out for his teammates both on the pitch and off it. But no, he was extraordinary. I mean, it's almost as if when everyone else is tiring towards the end of games, he sort of dips into this sort of surplus energy tank and continues. It
was vintage
to go forward.
It was for me that he was vintage Stankovic. It was unbelievable. It was so nice to see. I loved it. Really did.
Yeah.
Really,
what I love
really
about
great.
it too is that it was such a textbook example of a player who he's 23, just turned 23. You can see just how, when he's 25, how much better he's going to be, because he only knows one speed now. He goes pedal to the metal all the time, and I absolutely love it. I mean, some of the running he was doing in the 93rd minute was just ridiculous. But once he slows down, once he, takes a breath, once he stops, yesterday's yellow I thought was ridiculous. But in general, I mean, he has picked up cards. Once he slows down a little bit in these challenges, once he, gets a little less out of his head, a little less fiery, and that guy's 80th percentile gear is still faster and more intense than most players. So you could just see already, as good as he is, once he the game comes to him a little more, he's going to be unbelievable.
I mean, I thought the brilliant. What we're speaking about him and his reckless challenges. When Christian Eriksen this past week said that every time Barella goes into a challenge, he has a heart attack and thinks he's going to get sent off. I mean, that's how the players feel we're playing with him, and it is. Looks like
Eriksen already knows the standard of refereeing in Serie A.
Yeah, clearly. Yeah, let's blame it on that. No, but I mean, we have to speak about Alexis Sanchez. I mean, if you can clone someone's attitude and talk about wanting to be at Inter, talking about wanting to be there. He pulled his, I think his right thigh, or was it hamstring? And he, it was almost as if Conte was taping him together himself and sending him back out there. I mean, it's like having Conte's attitude on the pitch when Alexis Sanchez plays there. I mean, that's going to be a massive blow to Inter's chances. I really think so, and I hope he recovers. We don't know how serious it is, but he's out for at least 2 weeks, isn't he? I mean, what do you think, Mo? I mean, can we easily just discard Alexis now from the rest of the season, or the remainder of the week, so as it were?
I think it's any muscular injury is always worrisome, because they might not be that serious, but they need to take their time for recovery. But I think maybe a bet will be made. We lose him for the semi-final, but we put him in on the bench in the final if necessary, and do a Hail Mary and throw him in the last 15 minutes if required. So I don't know. I think it's of all the things we've spoken about, I think it's probably the least of our concerns. I think assuming, of course, that both Lukaku and Lautaro maintain their fitness, along with Moses, who can sort of fill in the near orbit region of a center forward. I think we're okay there. It's the midfield trio that we've spoken about. That's the area that I would be most concerned in losing form or fitness at the moment. I think Sanchez, as amazing of a gladiator he's been, and a huge, like you said, he's really demonstrated how the willingness and the desire to play for Inter and desire to play for Conte. He is one of those players that hopefully will not need to miss too much in the last 2 games.
Hope so. Right. Well, before we move on, I just wanted to, assuming it's going to be Shakhtar, I'm going to ask for a prediction. I'm going to start with you, Will. What do you think?
I will go with the same result that we got in the quarterfinal, 2-1. I don't think it will be close. So I don't think it'll be comfortable by any means. I actually think it'll be a fairly similar game. So I just hope that we end up on the right side of it again. And then I don't care who we get in the final, because if we're worrying about who we've got in the final, that means we've got to the final. So
yeah,
let's do one step at a time.
That's a brilliant circular argument. No, reasoning logic. I love it. No, but Will, do you think Lukaku will score his 10th? Will score for the 10th consecutive game in an Europa League game?
It's a very strange stat, isn't it? I personally, I'm not that sort of blown away by it, because it kind of spans 2 or 3 years. It feels a little bit artificial in terms of a stat, also because the Europa League is not the pinnacle of, if it had been 10 consecutive Champions League games, that would be something good. But no, obviously, I think the stat that impresses me more is 31 goals in the season, and just the absolutely extraordinary performance again he put in this game. I remember that last summer there was a headline on Gazzetta that said, "Is this man really worth 80 million euros?" Yeah. I think the answer is no. He's worth more than that.
Yeah, exactly.
So, but he was absolutely ridiculous today. I mean, he speaks incredibly well off the pitch. He's the guy that they go to when things are going a bit shaky on the pitch. Whenever Inter's in trouble, they'll look for him. He took more kicks than Maradona in the '86 World Cup last night. He was bullying everyone with his back to goal. Scored a brilliant goal, even though he'd been fouled and should have won a penalty. The referee did well to play advantage there, but absolutely remarkable.
We were told that he can't link up. We were told that he can't win the ball. He can't hold up the ball. We were told that his first touch is crap. There was a lot of things we were told by Premier League geniuses, but they were all wrong. So make of that what you will. I mean, I have nothing but the utmost respect for that man on and off the pitch. The way he just spreads positivity around him is just, wow. I mean, in every way he's handled himself, he's just been world class. He's an ambassador for the Serie A, not just Inter. So, no, I couldn't agree with you more. Mike, what's your prediction?
I'm going to go with, Will stole a little bit of my thunder there. I'm going to say 2-1. At the end of the day, I do think this is a tougher team than Bayer Leverkusen, but I do think this isn't a more talented team than Bayer Leverkusen. And I do think it says something about where Inter are right now, that they've been winning, they've been beating teams they should be beating. And look, they, especially if, let's say, they beat Donetsk and it's Sevilla in the final, for instance, well, then you just played the best player you're going to play the rest of the way in Kai Havertz, because Donetsk, for all the talent they have, they don't have somebody like that. Inter did a great job apart from that one error of shutting him down for the most part. I do think at the end of the day, talent wins out. I think form wins out here. And I think, I wouldn't be shocked if there's some unexpected lineup changes. I think Conte really set the table for the fact that, by playing Eriksen, in that midfield three for 40-something minutes, he either greased the wheel to make Donetsk have to think about that and have to prepare for that, or he could be warming him up to say, okay, you went 40 this time, you're going to go 60-something next time. So I think there's just too much skill here. I think Inter just in too much form, and I'm not going to sit here and say I'm 1,000% convinced they're going to win the final, because, this is essentially Sevilla's home competition for the last 15 years. And, Manchester United is Manchester United. There's a lot of talent and there's a lot of propensity to get some penalties they shouldn't. So we'll see about the final if they get to the final. But I do think this is a match they should be winning.
Yeah. Okay. Mo, what about you?
I will think the match is probably a Getafe-esque 3-1, in the sense that the score might be a little bit, in our, lying in our favor. I think we're going to concede, but I think we're also going to score more than just 2 goals, because of the fact that we're more well rested, more cognizant of the fact that they need to take their chances more necessary in terms of being clinical. So I reckon maybe it's the same scenario of a 2-1 at halftime, and then Shakhtar are chasing the game. We shut them down and then score a third in the second half, right towards the end, to calm everyone's nerves down.
Yeah, I'm going to go with 3-1. I think this is it's going to be tough, but I think it's going to be similar. Yeah, I think it's going to be a similar. The match is going to look similar to how it looked a little bit like against Getafe, but these guys are a little bit better. I think they're going to make life very difficult for Inter, and I think they're going to score. But I do think that Inter will score a goal at the end and then get to the final. Right, let's move on to the part of the show where we pay tribute, rip the piss out of, and criticize someone or something heavily in the world of football, starting with the negativity. This week's Modji, which will be presented by Mr. Mike Pilucci.
Good week, so I don't have too many complaints. I don't have anything that I'm going to really rant about. I don't even have a person I'm going to rant about. I'm just going to rant about 5 little words, or some variation of these 5 words. The 5 words are this: Inter lead for Sandro Tonali. I have read this headline for 4 months. I have known that they have agreed to personal terms with Sandro Tonali through his agent for 4 months. And yet for 4 months, I read this headline and I see no deal being done. And I see scenarios in which, Milan doesn't want Rangnick anymore. Well, I guess they'll have money to spend. Maybe they want to go back in the race for Sandro Tonali. Oh, Juventus hiring Andrea Pirlo. Did you know that he's a great Italian midfielder? Maybe Sandro Tonali will like playing for Juventus. I don't know if any of this is true. What I do know is that any of it is plausible because Beppe has not cut the check. And I understand that Beppe Murati is great at his job. I still feel like at the end of the day, this gets done and all of my worrying is for nothing. But when it comes to the future heartbeat of Italy's midfield, pay an extra 5 million euros. No one will remember this when he has 80 caps for Italy when he retires.
When he
Just get a deal done before I have an aneurysm, because I can't do it much longer, guys. I really can't.
Amen. Preach, Reverend Mike. Right, let's move on to something much more positive. This week's Murati, which will be presented by Mr. Mohamed Nassar.
He works a lot, he's intelligent, and he surprises people sometimes with his ideas. Not easy to find one person of these qualities.
Yeah, so this week is full of positivity, a lot to choose from. So I'm going to pick not one but 2 Muratis. The first Murati pertaining to the game yesterday. And I think it's something, again, like Mike did, not a person, but a certain sensation. The sense of a team. We haven't seen the sense of a team. Eriksson tracking back, covering Moses on the right back position. Sanchez getting bandaged up and shoved back on the pitch willingly. Godin looking like he's 26, not 36 or 34, however old he is. Lukaku, Barella, it's a sense of unity, unified cause, and the team. I think this is one of the best things that I've taken away from the match yesterday. So this is one thing, and then the second thing is a bit of a selfish, pat on the back, but not a selfish pat on the back, but maybe a thank you to the people who listen to the show. The last few weeks, for whatever reason, I've been looking at the YouTube links of the podcast when it goes up, and the comments have been so amazing. Like I got to thank everyone who's going to put up a comment there. It's so nice to hear that you guys are enjoying the show. It sometimes feels like you're talking into a vacuum, and when we hear back good feedback or bad feedback, but any feedback is always lovely. So thank you very much to everyone who's gone out of the way and put up a comment, especially a positive one for us.
Yeah.
So
yeah, for sure.
These are my Murati for.
It's here. It's been like that. I got to say, thanks for making that point, Mo, because it's been like that for quite some time now on a lot of platforms. And please, dear listeners, don't think that we take that for granted at all. We really, really appreciate to hear from you, and the fact that you like what we do is just even more. And the listener numbers are going. We've never had as many listeners as we have now and subscribers, and the love we feel from you guys is just very humbling, and we're very grateful for that. Right, let's move on to something much more comical. This week's Frog, which will be presented by Mr. William Becker.
È clamoroso! Autogol di Ranocchia!
Yes, this week's Frog is nothing to do with Inter, the Europa League, or football actually. Although I was tempted to award it to anyone who thought that Christian Eriksen wasn't a world-class footballer, because he came on and painted football for half an hour in that game against Leverkusen. So I'm still reeling from that. But the Frog of the week is actually Carol Kirkwood, who most people probably haven't heard of. She is a weather presenter for BBC News, and she was presenting for their breakfast show on Monday morning at 8 a.m. in Greenwich Park, which actually is quite close to where I am here in South London. She always finds a picturesque spot to deliver the weather forecast in the morning. And they threw to her, and she was looking at the lovely morning sky, the sort of empty grass behind her at the top of the hill, and she said, "Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Greenwich Park. It's looking lovely here." And she'd seen some dog walkers and some people that were jogging, sort of in the background, and she meant to sort of give us a sort of set the scene for those of us who weren't able to be at Greenwich Park on that lovely Monday morning. But instead, she combined the two and said by mistake that she'd seen a lot of doggers in the park in Greenwich Park. And
for those who don't know what doggers are, you might want to say what that is.
Google it or use another search engine, which is available.
Should we be encouraging people to Google that? I'm not sure
I was going to say, do not Google that.
I'll ask a friend then.
Google it at home and tell your wife or spouse about it.
On the incognito tab.
Yes, on the incognito tab. And also don't do it at work or school or anything like that.
But to her credit, she didn't flinch at all, which is more than could be said for me. I think I would have dropped to the floor and then hidden myself for a month if I'd said that on national television at 8 a.m. when probably lots of people are having their cereal in the morning.
That's the thing about British TV that's so brilliant. When someone does that early in the morning, it really everyone sees it, and
it's been shared by everyone on social media in the last couple of days. So embarrassing, because she's a great presenter. She's very lovely, but now anyone who hears her name in future will think immediately of that, and that's the perils of live TV. You can't hide. So
yes,
goodness me.
Thanks for that.
You're welcome.
I'd like to. Well, that was all your time for this week. Will, thanks so much for coming on and for that lovely story about dog in the morning. My Reverend Mike, again, you preach, and I love when you do that. But to make you a little bit happy before we go, Romeo Agresti, who works for Goal Italia, one of the best Juventus reporters in the world, to be honest. He has had it confirmed from inside Juventus. He doesn't name who, but he says high person official at Juventus that Juventus are not in the race for Sandro Tonali.
Hallelujah.
Yeah,
it's a rope-a-dope.
Yeah, exactly. It's Inter Beffa. Yeah. They're building it up to be the Inter Beffa of Inter Beffa, if you want to. But I do trust Romeo. I do trust Romeo.
Yeah, he's very well.
Yeah.
Can I just say before we leave now, I've just remembered one more thing.
Yes.
That we've had 2 former Inter players who've tested positive for COVID-19 this week, so we should just wish them well. Ricky Alvarez and Sima Vasalico. So,
yeah, that's true. That's true. Atletico Madrid. And where does Ricky Maravilla play now?
Velez, I think, or was that where he came from before we got him? I don't know. Yeah. Nowhere relevant. Sorry, Ricky.
Nowhere relevant. And I just, whenever I hear his name, I can't help but giggle at all the idiots who said that we bought the Argentinian Kaká, because Kaká was mobile and he was not. Right.
Closer to Kaká in the Italian language, maybe.
Exactly, in every language, Spanish. Yeah. Right, but before this goes off the rails, I'd like to thank you, Reverend Mike, and also you, Mr. Will Beckman, and Mo Nassar. Until next week, I am your host, Nima Ruzzari, wishing you a happy week, a final place in the Europa League, and sempre e solo Forza Inter. Forza Inter!